Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Simon bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. While I was away on my trip, Wizards of the Coast started their 5 weeks of Origins series, releasing the background stories of the 5 featured Planeswalkers in the upcoming set, Magic Origins. Their first week's article focused on Chandra Nalaar, which I have already covered in a past video. So, as I was reading this new lore for Chandra, I found that there were a lot of changes and revisions done. Now, Chandra's previous lore wasn't completely fleshed out to begin with, but there were other very blatant changes made to her new lore for Magic Origins. Since I covered her old lore, I thought it would be cool just to go back and take a look at some of the changes Wizards of the Coast has made. As I go over these changes, I'll leave a link to my old Chandra video here and in the description below. I suggest watching that video as well so you can get a full idea of how much her lore has been altered. So, as the article called Fire Logic begins, we finally get the name of Chandra's home plane, which is referred to as Kaladesh. Previously, her home plane was unknown, or at least no name was available for it. Kaladesh is a world full of inventors and artificers. Think of it like a more steampunky version of Ravnica. Chandra is the daughter of 2 great inventors in their own right, but as a child she never really got into the family trade. Whenever she attempted to make something new, her temper or lack of patience always halted her progress. Her family life was also changed in this revised lore. In her original story, we know only that her mother is strict while her father was sympathetic and caring. In this article, Chandra's parents are both kind, responsible, and very loving. Her old lore also stated that she had at least 3 siblings, which all seem to have been cut out of her revised story. It appears Chandra is now an only child. Since she was kind of a terrible inventor, Chandra's parents allowed her to try other things which could promote her interests. She attempted activities such as art and scholastic work, but she again lacked the patience for such things. Eventually, her parents did bring her into the family business, not as an inventor, but as a courier. Chandra's parents were in fact illegal traffickers of a magical substance known as Aether. Aether on Kaladesh is a coveted source of power, which all of its wonderful machines and artifacts run off of. Problem is, the entire stock of Aether is controlled by a governing force on the plane known as the Consuls. The Consuls have a stranglehold on the Aether supplies, and thus control its distribution and the very lives of all those who depend on it. Chandra's family is sort of like the Robin Hoods of their plane, able to get their hands on this substance and giving it out to those who need it yet cannot afford the Consul's high prices. They have friends and networks throughout the city, but just as many enemies, so getting the Aether to their clients is always hazardous. Since the people know her family, they believe it's time to allow young Chandra to be their Aether courier. Of course, Chandra is pumped to try something new, to become the best courier the world has ever seen. Yet, on her first job, she stumbles into Consul guards and is held up and inspected. She fights back with fiery passion, but submits when the captain, named Baral, appeared. He is a very large man with a stone-cold voice which seemed completely devoid of compassion, leaving him nothing more than a frigid and careless individual. After some insults, Chandra begins to feel a heat growing inside her, this anger and rage building up and reaching the surface of her skin. When Baral touched Chandra firmly on the shoulder, she finally erupted for the first time, fire glowing and then exploding from her hands. The captain and the guards jumped back as they were stunned, having not seen anything like this before. She uses their distraction to escape the guards, her illegal package still safe. The guards began the manhunt, deploying copters and other unmanned mechanical devices to find the dangerous trafficker. As Chandra is being chased, she meets with her original contact, a family friend named Mrs. Pashiri. The kindly old lady gives Chandra the signal which indicates her to be an ally to her family. She explains her current situation, and Mrs. Pashiri is more than willing to help. She unlocks the door to the Consul's great foundry while distracting the tailing copters. While inside, all the animatronic servitors in the foundry sprung to life and attacked Chandra. She once again summoned this uncontrollable fire of hers and literally blasted the mechanical guards to bits before making her escape back to her family. When she arrives home, her parents see her clothes burnt and her hair singed. They were worried for their daughter. Chandra explains everything to them and believes she is a complete freak. Her mother explains that she is in fact a pyromancer, a wielder of fire which has not been seen on their world for many years. Chandra still seems upset at what she is, but her parents both affirm that they love her no matter what, and that being a pyromancer doesn't make them any less proud of her. In fact, she is quite special. This is another rather obvious difference from Chandra's old story. Originally, Chandra's parents were both very disappointed in her ability to control fire. They were obviously upset when her powers came to light and tried to hide it as best they could. Now, with the consuls looking for them, Chandra's parents pack up their lives and head out on the road. They jump from village to village, avoiding the guards and escaping the clutches of the main city. In each village, the Nalaar family is treated as guests until Chandra accidentally scares a number of wild beasts from the surrounding forests. These animals were precious to the villagers, and they saw this act as a great sign of disrespect. To prevent her powers from flaring up randomly, which had been the case thus far for Chandra, her father made her a special steam vent device. This backpack of sorts took excess energy from the body and safely turned it into steam, allowing her more control over her fires whenever she lost her patience or became angered. Chandra's mother then explains that the consuls are after them not only because they were smugglers, but because of what Chandra was. The consul controlled power because they controlled the Aether. Since Chandra's abilities did not require Aether, they had no control over her, and that scared them. As Captain Balar continued his search, the consuls actually told him to give up. He was spending too much Aether in his manhunt, and they decided to just let the family live in the wilderness. Balar thought differently. He believed that pyromancers like Chandra were nothing more than the remainder of a chaotic and uncivilized world. To let her live would be dangerous to their advanced society. Again, we see a difference in her story here. In her original lore, pyromancy was illegal on her plane, and thus, its governing force was sent after her. In her new story, we see it's not actually illegal, but rather it's just one man's crazy idea of how the world should be. Eventually, one of the villagers who were upset with Chandra told the captain of their location, and they quickly surrounded the village. Chandra was out foraging when this was going on and came back to see consul guards everywhere. They were harassing a local village woman, so she stepped out and grabbed their attention, allowing the woman to escape. Balar states that she and her power are dangerous, but Chandra shows him her father's vent pack and tells him she is no longer the danger he thinks she is. Balar does not care, for the idea of pyromancy alone was the biggest threat to him, and so he made her the threat. He took torches to the huts of the village, setting them all ablaze with the hopes of blaming the fire and the deaths of the villagers on Chandra's pyromancy. Chandra went to fight off the men, but her fire fizzled due to the vent pack still being worn. Chandra's father then shows up and distracts the guards with a flash device so that she could escape. Chandra and her father become separated, and Chandra finds the hut where they were staying at. She can't find her mother anywhere, but only discovers her singed scarf. In despair, Chandra collapses at the apparent death of her mother, while Balar and his guards finally catch up to her. Balar pulls out a dagger, but her father steps between them, pleading with the captain to take him and spare his daughter. Baral stabs Chandra's father with the dagger and he collapses near Chandra. She is now completely gone. She cannot feel, hear, or see anything around her, even as the guards capture her and transport her back to the main city. She sees nothing but her father's dying face in her eyes. Chandra is put on display by the consuls, and her crimes are read aloud to the crowd of people who have gathered to see justice served. Chandra is accused of setting the village on fire and killing a number of its citizens, which was of course a lie by Baral. Chandra still cannot focus on what's going on around her, until she hears the voice of her executioner. It's the cold voice of Baral. She looks out to the crowd, hoping her mother would come to save her. Surely, if she were alive, she would do something. Her lack of presence confirmed to Chandra that her mother was indeed dead, and she was still wearing the vent pack preventing her fire. She was halfway ready to give up. Perhaps her death was a just reward. After all, she believed that she was the reason her parents were killed in the first place. But something reminded her of her life, and of her name, her family's name. It was Mrs. Bashiri. She was in the crowd. giving her that same signal, her family's signal. It reminded Chandra that her family sacrificed everything for her, and she wasn't about to throw it away. Her fire grew more intense than she had ever felt before. The rage inside her was uncontrollable. The cuffs around her hands began to melt. The Vimpak hissed and bucked violently. As Baral's blade came falling towards Chandra's neck, the heat exploded into a pulse which forced him back and lit her entire body on fire. She was living flame, and her next blast left her blind to everything but fire. She was disoriented and lost. When the smoke finally died down, she found that the crowd had disappeared, along with the city. She appeared in a tranquil place, facing monks hooded in robes. She saw these as perhaps more executioners and blasted them with her fire. To her surprise, the fire did not affect them, and one of the monks managed to completely subdue her flames. The monks greeted the pyromancer and said that she was welcome there. So that concludes Chandra's new lore. Now, the meat of this story had a lot of revisions done to it. Let's first begin with the village Chandra and her parents stayed at. In the original story, this small village was always her home and her family never escaped from anything. The guards were actually only summoned there because of reports that a huge fire was destroying the village. In conflict with this new version, which says the guards started the fire, the old lore said that Chandra herself was the cause of this destruction. She had been forced into an arranged marriage by her parents, and Chandra set the houses on fire in an attempt to scare away her potential match. As Chandra escapes the burning village, the guards find it and believe that this power could not be the result of a single person, and declare that the entire village must be pyromancers. In the old lore, pyromancy is strictly forbidden, and so, the entire village is put to death. She comes back to her village just in time to find her parents and siblings being burned alive in their home. She surrenders to the guards, and right before she is executed, her spark ignites and she planeswalks to safety. So yeah, a lot of differences between this and her new revised story. From her origin, I assume her story stays relatively the same. The monks in robes she meets at the end are most likely the fire teachers of the Carol Keep, on the plane of Regatha, the first plane she ever traveled to. So there you go guys, the new story of Chandra Nalaar from Magic Origins, and how it compares to her old lore from days past. What do you guys think of this new revised story? Do you find it better or more fitting for her character? Let me know that in the comments below. Remember, if you want to compare the changes to her story more in-depthly, you can check out my old Chandra lore video, which I've linked in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share, and sub to the channel. It really goes a long way in helping me provide future content. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.